Hello, friends. Christian nationalism. It's starting to gain traction in the United States of America. You may have watched the debate between Douglas Wilson and Walter Veith, where they discussed Christian nationalism, where Douglas Wilson promoted Christian nationalism, and I'll provide a link in the description so that you can view that. But let's get it straight off the bat. I absolutely do not agree with Christian nationalism or anything of the like, setting up a theocracy of sorts in order to enforce one's religion on people. That is wrong. And now Douglas Wilson says that he wants to implement the first four commandments into society of the Ten Commandments. All of them, but especially the first four, which many people have said the government is to enforce civil matters, but matters of belief are not to be enforced. And so the first four commandments pertain to matters of belief, matters of religious conduct. The last six commandments relate to relations between people. And so no murdering, no stealing, no, those sort of things are absolutely enforced already by civil power, But there's no enforcing of you must worship Jesus Christ alone, and any deviation from worshiping Jesus Christ is to be met with civil penalties, basically, which is basically upholding the first commandment. And so we don't have a society, we don't live in a world where the first four commandments relating to beliefs, relating to worship of God, are enforced in a specific way, where you must worship in a specific way. It's only civil relations in terms of person to person, in terms of violence, in terms of theft, and other things like that, that are, part of how the secular world views its relation with religion. And so Douglas Wilson argues that there's a secular takeover that's occurred, and we need to become Christian. So he says we need Christian officials in government, as well. And he would say that they should exclusively be Christian. There should be no room for other faiths in government. And so is he saying that there should be some sort of a test of faith when someone goes into government? And if there is a test of faith, how do you set up the parameters of the test? But anyway, this is a huge development. This is religio-fascism that is emerging in the United States of America. Now, I would argue that the first four commandments, our relation to beliefs and God and how we worship God and how we relate to God, are already enforced. Whoa, you mean they're already enforced? Yes. The question is, how are they enforced? How are they enforced? And if you're a Christian and you subscribe to Christianity and the Ten Commandments, then you will voluntarily, on your own accord, based on whatever denomination you subscribe to, decide to keep the commandments, to not have any other gods and so on and so forth. To worship Jesus, right? That's the first commandment. You will decide to do that, and you don't need the government to tell you how you are to do that, So it's self-regulating. It's organic, is what I'm trying to say. Even when it comes to all the rules and regulations of the church, whatever church you subscribe to, you don't need the government or the power of government in order to enforce your version of Christianity on people. People can subscribe to it already voluntarily. And so he says that Douglas Wilson makes the case that there will be certain Christian religious rules like Sunday sacredness that will be enforced by law in his version of a Christian theocratic society. Now, first of all, I don't need the government to tell me, as a Seventh-day Adventist, to keep Saturday holy in order for me to keep it holy. I don't do a lot of things on the Sabbath, on Saturday. I subscribe voluntarily to the parameters that I believe God has put forward for me. And he can subscribe to the parameters that he believes that God has put forth for him. And so if he wants to keep Sunday, the day of the sun, holy, then that's what his conscience is telling him to do. And does he really need, in order to fulfill that requirement that he believes he has, does he really need the power of government to enforce it for him or to make rules for him? Now, if it's organic, right, there's no need for civil laws. There's no need for civil laws. If you do promote civil laws now and say that, according to custom, that Sunday sacredness is a Christian institution, and that I want it, therefore, to be enforced by law in a Christian country, the moment you say that, you're going to delve into sectarianism, because I'm going to say, well, no. According to my understanding of it, Saturday's the Sabbath. You know? And then you have the problem with liberal Christians and conservative Christians, because not everyone defines Christianity the same way, you see? And so there are secular Christians, there are liberal Christians who have a totally different framework of how they define Christianity, you see? And then there's conservative Christians who have a different framework. And then there's Sabbath-keeping Christians and all sorts of different creeds on how Christianity should be defined. But Douglas Wilson wants his version of mere Christianity to be the framework by which all civil laws and all different denominations are to abide by. And you know, that is a dangerous thing, because, like I said, I don't need the government to tell me to keep Saturday holy, the Sabbath holy, and therefore I'm able to do that. No, I'm doing that already. And my question is Douglas Wilson doing that with his version of Christianity? Is he closing his shops and stopping all commerce on Sunday? And no one is stopping him from doing that. He can do that. So why does he need laws, or propose that he needs laws in order to make that happen? Now, he will say that he's proposing custom first and then laws. But you can just revert to custom. You can just do that based on your custom. But what he wants to do is define Christianity in a certain way and then enforce it, you see? And so, you know, if his version of Christianity necessitates the idea that you must have the government to enforce religious dogma in order to keep it, then I would say that his framework should be thrown into the rubbish bin and recycled, like the king, you know, and recycled. But because I care for the environment, right? So this is the predicament that we're in, you see, and this is the danger of it all. That there will be sectarianism, there will be different versions of Christianity that people will propose, and not everyone will agree to it. And not only that, but nothing's stopping them from practicing their religious practices now. And so this is nothing more than a power grab. You'll essentially have a cartel of Christians, a committee of Christians, defining what Christianity means. He talks about enforcing the first 4 commandments. So what does not worshipping idols mean? Some people will say, throw them all into the trash. No images of any sort whatsoever. And some people will say, we need images, for whatever reason, in order to worship God. And so how do you enforce that now? You have to then define what is the orthodoxy of that, and then implement it in society, and there cannot be deviations from it, you see? But the system we're under, each person who voluntarily subscribes to their religious group determines how they're going to worship God according to their conscience, according to the parameters that their religion sets forth for them. And it's not for the government to then come in and say, well, actually, according to our religious committee and custom and the magisterium of the church, this is how it's supposed to be for you. I mean, this is sounding like Inquisition language here, And Jesus says you can't change, the kingdom of God doesn't come with how to put it. It doesn't come with forceful imposition. It comes to a change of heart, you see. And so in my theological understanding of it is that Jesus Christ will eventually one day set up a kingdom that he will set up when he in the future, in the very far future, But it's not for us to take it into our own hands to try and set up a kingdom of God on earth. Because it says, the kingdom of God is within you. My kingdom is not of this world, you see? So it's otherworldly. That's the point. Douglas Wilson has his version of Christianity called Mere Christianity, a basic rundown of Christianity that involves setting up a Christian government which will enforce the first 4 commandments pertaining to belief, as well as the last 6, which it already does in many ways. Our government already does that. The last 6 enforcing it. And that there will be a religious committee. There has to be a religious committee of sorts to then determine what is the orthodoxy and what isn't, And that is basically, Inquisition 2.0 right there, And I'm arguing that organically you can already keep the first 4 commands, and organically you can worship God according to the dictates of your conscience. Organically you can keep, whether it's Sunday, whether it's Saturday, holy. Organically you can do that. Now that doesn't stop me from proselytizing, because there is such a thing as free speech. But the moment that any one organization or institution or cartel of religious body is going to tell me, by its authority, that I'm wrong, I'm going to challenge it back and say that they're wrong, And at the moment they say that I have to now give up my freedom of conscience in order to conform to the orthodoxy, then I'm pushing back against that, And now Mr. Wilson wants to say that there will be tolerance in this Christian theocratic society, Government, he's forgetting that government is force. Government is force. The moment you take religious belief and put it into law, you're employing or potentially going to employ the use of force in order to keep an orthodoxy of sorts. And what I'm trying to say is you can do that without law, based on your conscience and you as an individual. But he's sort of against secularism as a whole, the primacy of the individual, let's just say, liberal values of free speech and freedom of conscience and pluralism and those sort of things. Those eventually become undermined, you see. Now, I don't say that he's sort of wanting to bring back the Inquisition, but what I am saying, I mean, he personally may not want that, but what I'm saying is that it's systematically flawed. This idea of you need Christian officials, and in order to have Christian officials, you need to then have a test of sorts to make sure that they're Christian. And if that's a prerequisite for running for office, let's just say, for having a Christian nation. And then you have to set up a parameter for that test. Well, it's not this, well, it is that, you know? And I would say, who the heck gave you the authority to do that? You know? Like Jesus says, the weeds and the wheat will grow together until he comes again. And Jesus Christ sends his angels to then divide the wheat from the weeds. So the good and the bad, Christ will then determine who's truly a Christian and who's not on the day of judgment, you know. But it's not for any one person to then say, oh, well, you have said I am a Christian, therefore you tick the box, therefore you qualify for running for office. I mean, that's creedalism, you know. That's creedalism. And that is a danger. You will end up with creedalism. You will end up with some version of sectarianism, because not everyone's going to toe the line. You'll end up enforcing religion, forcing religion, rather than allowing it to be an organic thing that comes from the heart. And my answer to the rise in secularism is, whose fault is that? You think that people just turned gay overnight? You think that people just became atheists overnight? No, these are deeply held beliefs and ways of life that will not simply go away because you enforce a Christian nation. It goes through voluntarily giving them up, through being touched by the gospel, preaching, teaching, evangelizing, allowing people to voluntarily subscribe to your worldview. And from there, people can determine how they want to run their course, you know. And so, you know, this is a dangerous thing. This is a dangerous thing. This religio-theocratic, nationalistic, fascistic mindset of one hegemonous society defined by Christian creed, which a committee of sorts will then define, and Americanism, which will also have to be defined. And then you have trouble with liberal Christians, you have trouble with Seventh-day Adventists, which I am, because we don't subscribe to the orthodoxy of mainstream Christianity. You'll have trouble with Muslims, you'll have trouble with Hindus. You know, and so these are the things that occur, you know. And I would say that the moment you want to enforce religion is an acknowledgement that your religion sucks, okay? Because you really need guns or force, the government, force, civil power to make your religion work. And you cannot just, and it's not good enough to just persuade people to follow based on heart to heart and something organic like that. The moment you do that, it acknowledges that you have a dead religion. You have a dead religion, and that's why secularism has emerged. You know, because we have to appeal to the heart, preach the gospel, one step at a time, not some swooping civil reform that then turns everyone from gay to non-gay. I mean, that's, what I'm saying, right? These things didn't happen in one day. It takes time. People can convert. People are free to convert. People are free to change their mind, change their views, So that's my point. That's my point. Yes, that's all I have to say. Thank you and God bless.